Yo, YouTube, what's up? It's your boy Sports and Fitness Rants. I'm back with another one for you guys, man. Make sure you click that like button. Make sure you subscribe to my channel, please. I'm still new. I'm trying to get this thing going here. I'd love to have some good debates and some good conversations. I'm not here to go back and forth with nonsense. So this video is going to be about the differences in the defensive mentality and differences in the defensive abilities of Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen, and what the difference is and what made them both so great in each in their own way, right? They were similar, but not the same kind of defenders, right? And anybody who watched Scottie Pippen and Michael Jordan play basketball consistently, you would see that there are small differences in the way that they approached the defensive part of the game. There's been a lot of made out lately, over the last couple of years, especially since Pippen came out with all those crazy comments about Michael Jordan and, the animosity that he has, or, the envy he has, or the hatred he has for Jordan, for, like I said, whatever the reasons were, or whatever the reasons are, they have some kind of, he's got some kind of problem, whatever. And a lot of people, a lot of Jordan haters, AKA LeBron lovers, came out the woodworks when Pippen started making these comments, and they kind of piggybacked off them. And then you would see a lot of people making these outlandish claims, like an Isaiah Thomas, these Nick Wrights of the world, the Shannon Sharps of the world. They were loving this kind of stuff. And, people came out and they tried to make these, claims that Scottie Pippen was a better defender than Michael Jordan was, or better on the defensive end than Michael Jordan was, because this is a trend that's been going on. They're trying to, raise Scottie Pippen, on the all-time, pantheons, so that they can make Michael Jordan's accomplishments look a little bit less than what they were. And this is getting crazy now because, like I've said in previous videos, you're trying to rewrite history. We're not going to allow them to rewrite the history of basketball that we all witnessed, that we watched. We watched these games. These things actually happened already. So you can't go back now and try to make people's, recollection or lack thereof, because a lot of these people that they're talking to have never even were around back then to watch these games or to watch these guys play in their primes together. So when they're trying to come out and tell you lies, you have no choice but to believe them because you don't know better. You didn't watch the games. You weren't there. So when they try to tell you something, oh, Scottie Pippen was a better defender than Michael Jordan, you might be like, oh, you know what? And then what do? You look on, Basketball Reference or something, and you see Scottie Pippen has, all these all defensive teams and stuff like that. So you might be like, oh, yeah, maybe, But this is ridiculous now. It's like I said, it's gone way out of hand. We're going way off the deep end on this stuff. This Michael Jordan bashing, man. Like I said, trying to uplift Pippen to lower Jordan. So anyway, we're going to focus on the defensive end for this video and the differences that I've seen in the years watching them play and watching how they guard players. So, before I start, Scottie Pippen was a great, all-time great defender. Whether he's, top 10 all time, as far as, just defenders in NBA history, I could say you could probably argue he's a top 10 defender of all time. Because the thing about what Scottie Pippen is he the greatest defensive small forward of all time? I mean, that you would have to probably say no, because you'd have to put someone like a Dennis Rodman in that conversation. There have been other great defensive small forwards in NBA history. Maybe they were, mostly defensive guys, right? Whereas someone like like a Scottie Pippen or a Dennis Rodman, let's say, for instance, Dennis Rodman was a straight defensive guy. That was really all he brought to the table was his rebounding and his defense. And that's not, saying that was, nothing. He was a great defensive player and a great rebounder. He wasn't good or average or, he was great at both of those things, all-time great in both of those things. But on the offensive end, Rodman was a liability. right? He was a liability. And that's because of him, not because he didn't lack, because he lacked offensive skills. He did. If you look at Rodman's college career, I believe he went to a junior college or a smaller college or whatever. When you look at his career, I think he averaged like in the 20s. And I read Dennis Rodman's book when I was in high school, and it talked about his offensive game and his offensive skills. But for some reason, in his mind, he wanted to focus strictly on rebounding and defense. That was just him personally. But now we're getting off the thing. So back to Scottie Pippen, right? So when you look at Scottie Pippen on the defensive end, the advantages he had over Jordan was that he was a little bit taller. His arms were a little bit longer. So he had that long arm, kind of lanky build to him. And when you watch Pippen out there, those long arms and the extra couple of inches he had on Jordan allowed him sometimes to give players a little bit of trouble when he was guarding them, as opposed to maybe when Jordan was guarding them. An example of this would be the 91 finals, where people try to make a big deal or try to make it seem as if Michael Jordan could not guard Magic Johnson, so they had to move Pippen on him, and that was what turned the series. That's not what happened. If you watch the games, if you watch games 1 through 5 in that series, you'll see exactly what the differences were and what the Bulls were trying to accomplish with moving Michael Jordan off Magic Johnson and back and forth and vice versa, right? They would take Pippen on, take Pippen off, put Jordan on, take Jordan off. And the reason was because they needed Jordan on the offensive end. They needed Jordan on the offensive end, not to mention Magic Johnson is 6'9". Michael Jordan, some people say Michael Jordan's not even 6'6". He's a little bit, maybe a half an inch shorter than that, maybe 6'5.5" or something. But anyway, even if he was 6'6", let's say, Magic Johnson got 3 inches on him in height right there. Magic Johnson probably had about 20 or 30 pounds on him also. And the fact, like I said, they needed Michael Jordan on the offensive end. Magic Johnson is a savvy veteran at that point, right? And he was getting Michael Jordan, and this is one of the things I'm going to point out about Michael Jordan's defense. He was getting Michael Jordan in foul trouble sometimes in, some of those games. Because Michael Jordan always started the game on Magic Johnson. And then sometimes Michael Jordan would pick up a foul or two here because of Michael Jordan's aggressiveness. And this is something that I want to point out. So, when we're talking about Pippen and we're talking about the long arms and the height advantages, this is what we're talking about, which caused Magic Johnson to have a little bit more trouble, because the way that Magic Johnson played the game is Magic Johnson could have easily, if he wanted to, taken Scottie off the dribble and went to the rim or try to create his own shot. That's not the way Magic Johnson played the game. Magic Johnson was always trying to run the offense the right way and set up other players. So when you watch those NBA Finals games, you'll notice Magic Johnson is never trying to force the ball up the court to kind of, blow by Pippen or to get past Pippen. He's always has his back to the basket, and he's, doing this kind of stuff, and he's trying to set the offense. He's pointing guys which way to go, and he's backing Pippen down, looking to make the play to run the offense or whatever. And that was harder against Pippen than Jordan because, like I said, Pippen had the longer arms and he was a couple inches taller. So he was able to contest a lot of things where when Jordan was on him, Magic, a lot of times you can see he was able to look over the top of Jordan and see. Now, that doesn't make you necessarily a better defender or more effective. All it does, like I said, is it changes Magic Johnson's approach up. He has to act differently against Pippen than he does Jordan. So like I said, so that was one advantage that Pippen had, was the longer reach, the height advantage on Jordan. But where Pippen loses his advantages is in some of the athletic abilities. So he's not as quick as Michael Jordan on defense, right? He doesn't have the instincts that Michael Jordan had on defense. And he doesn't have that the shot blocking ability that Michael Jordan had. I believe Pippen went over 100 blocks for a season one time, I believe. And he was close to a couple of other seasons, maybe like 93 or something like that blocks. When you look at Michael Jordan had 2 seasons over 100 blocks. And a couple other seasons that were, maybe in the 80s and stuff like that or whatever. Now, that's not saying that Michael Jordan is a better defender overall, but what that points out to you is that at about 2 inches shorter than Pippen, Michael Jordan blocked more shots at a higher volume, a per game volume. Jordan was a better shot blocker. And why was that? Because the one thing that Michael Jordan had, which was a strength and a weakness of his on the defensive end, is Michael Jordan was very aggressive. So a lot of times, especially early in Michael Jordan's career, because he was out there by himself in those first like 3, 4 seasons, Michael Jordan gambled a lot. He played defense like he was in the casinos, right? He gambled, man. He would go for those steals. He would go for that block shot. He would. And to his credit, the thing about it was where most players would gamble and always be out of position and cost them their team's wins or cost their team's baskets on a regular basis, Michael Jordan gambled a lot, but at the same time, he was winning a lot of those exchanges with the gambles, right? He came out on top. So if let's say he gambled 10 times in a game, he would probably win that gamble about 7 times, 6 times. He would get that ball or make that block, you know? And that's, like I said, that's his instincts that he was born with, his natural instincts and his athletic ability and his mind. Because let's not forget, though, on the defensive end, your biggest, the biggest thing you can have going for you when you play defense is your tenacity, right? You have to want to play defense. It has to be something that you want to do at a high level, Now, granted, not everybody can play defense at a high level, even if you mentally want to, but think about that. Defense is mostly your attitude and your mentality and the way you and your want to. You have to want to play defense, right? Defense is ugly, man. Defense is not, something you're going to get the glory for, right? What do people always point to? They always point to the offensive numbers. They always point to the offensive side of the game. The defensive side of the ball doesn't really get much credit, especially these days. So it's not pretty. It's not flashy, right? It's not Hollywood to play defense. But that's how you win, right? And Michael Jordan was more tenacious than Scottie Pippen on the defensive end. So you have the advantages to Jordan would be, like I said, his mentality on the defensive end. Even though Pippen was a tenacious defender, I'm not saying that Pippen was not a tenacious defender, but there's levels, right? And Jordan was just a little bit more aggressive on the defensive. Like I said, that was a plus and a minus for him. Sometimes he would be out of position. Sometimes he would go for the steal and not get it. Sometimes he would go for the block and he would cause a foul or things like that. But that was also a plus for the Bulls, was Jordan's tenacity. Another aspect of defense is your quickness, right? Your ability to move your feet, to react to your opponent, what he's doing on the offensive end. You have to have quick feet and quickness, right? And that edge goes to Jordan. Jordan was the quicker player. Now, when you watch Michael Jordan play and you watch Scottie Pippen play, this is how I relate it. Scottie Pippen to me was like a bishop on a chessboard. He moved in angles, right? The bishop could only move on a diagonal, right? When you play chess, that's how Scottie Pippen moved. He moved in diagonals. When you watch Scottie Pippen play, or you watch contrast to Michael Jordan play, Jordan was more fluid, right? He was more fluid. He could move more fluidly, the way his movements were. When you watch Scottie Pippen move, it was more herky-jerky, like a slant almost, right? He didn't really have a smooth crossover. It was more of a like I said, a diagonal move. That's the way Pippen moved. So when you're talking about foot speed and moving your feet on defense, Jordan was more able to bend more, to be more, fluid in his movements as far as how he would move his feet, how he would have his arms, his body positions. Whereas Pippen had more problems staying in front of guys one-on-one. So what I'm getting to is that Michael Jordan was a better, I would say, on-ball perimeter defender than Scottie Pippen was because A, he was more aggressive on that end, and B, he had quicker feet. Now, we talked about the advantages that Pippen had with the longer arms and the height. So a lot of times what would happen is, Pippen, a guy that, let's say, Pippen and Jordan would sometimes switch off on guys, just to, like I said earlier with Magic Johnson, you kind of give the player a different look. And what you would notice is that players could go around Pippen easier than they could Michael Jordan, right? They could dribble around Pippen, either with a crossover or a hesitation move, something like that. They would be able to get around Pippen easier than they would be able to get around Jordan because, like I mentioned, the foot speed there and the way that they moved. But what Pippen could do better than Jordan, as far as that would go, would be contesting shots because of his long arms and his height. So, for an example, let's say the people that Pippen would have problems guarding were those kind of guys that were good shooters that could get their own shot and could hit contested shots. You know, guys like a Glenn Rice, for example. Glenn Rice torched Pippen several times, you know, during his playing career. And Glenn Rice was a big body. I think he was like 6'7", 6'8", so he was about the same height as Pippen, if not taller, but he was bigger than Pippen. You know, Glenn Rice probably had about 20 pounds on Scottie Pippen. Guys like a Jamal Mashburn. Jamal Mashburn notoriously put up 50-something on Pippen. And these are similar players. Because what those guys can do, a Glenn Rice or a Jamal Mashburn, and I didn't name big name guys, right? These aren't big name guys that you're like, oh man, these are, you know, but anybody who knows basketball from the 90s knows Jamal Mashburn and Glenn Rice, and those guys could shoot and they could make contested shots. So whereas, you know, Michael Jordan would be able to keep them in front of them, they would be able to rise up on Jordan, you know, more easily because they were taller and bigger players. Whereas a Scottie Pippen, he wouldn't be able to necessarily keep them in front of him as easy, but he would be able to contest their shots a little bit better. Now, we just talked about perimeter defense there. And, you know, and now let's talk about post defense, right? And I know I'm a little bit all over the place here, but I'm just trying to give you guys examples and cover different areas of defense. So when you're talking about post defense, I would have to give the edge to Jordan because once again, we're talking about the physical gifts here. Michael Jordan is stronger than Scottie Pippen pound for pound. And you've heard people acknowledge this before. You've heard players talk about how strong Michael Jordan was in the post. Now, this is on the offensive end. Michael Jordan would get people in the post, man. He'd put you in that post and you'd be at his mercy. And it didn't matter how, I mean, I saw Michael Jordan post up Anthony Mason before, all right? And we all know that Anthony Mason probably had about 50 pounds on Michael Jordan. They were about the same height, but Anthony Mason was built like a tank, man. And Jordan would post this dude up, especially, you know, I remember in the playoffs, Pippen was not as great as a defender on the post because he didn't have the base, the strength, the base strength that Michael Jordan did. So, you know, one of the things that, you know, people I think forget about Michael Jordan on the defensive end is that he had defensive moves. They were patented moves that Michael Jordan had on the defensive end. And if you watch defensive players, they have their tendencies, right? And they have their little tricks of the trade. You know, John Stockton used to have little tricks that he would do to players. You know, maybe grab their jersey on the bottom here real quick. Maybe grab a short. You know, hook an arm. You know, John Stockton was known for doing these little quote unquote dirty things. You know, that weren't really dirty, but they were little tricks that he picked up. And John Stockton was a tenacious defender. Doesn't get a lot of credit for being a defender or get talked about much. But John Stockton was another guy that was tenacious, right? But back to Jordan. Jordan had a couple of moves that I noticed from watching games of him play on the defensive end. So we all know about the block from behind. He would come from behind, mostly big men, always like 7-foot guys that didn't know he was coming. They would be down the post, especially Patrick Ewing. He would get Patrick Ewing with this all the time. And these big guys would turn to make like a shot or something, and they think they're by themselves or they're trying to, and Jordan would come from behind and, you know, get that out of here, man, you know, and he slapped that out of the air. And he was great at that, He also had the move when he was on the perimeter and he was defending somebody one-on-one on the perimeter. He would have that move where he would poke his, now, when I say that Scottie Pippen had longer arms than Michael Jordan, this is not to say that Michael Jordan had short arms or he didn't even have arms comparable for a player his size. Michael Jordan was very gifted genetically. We all know about his freaky hands, but his arms were not short. You know, he did have long arms for a player his size, but when we're talking about a Scottie Pippen, you know, Pippen had the bigger wingspan. But Michael Jordan would have this move where when he was on the perimeter, he would, you know, reach around and poke the ball out from behind. You know, and it was almost like one motion. You know, where the player would be going and he would do one of these, hit the ball and take it and go. I've seen him do it to numerous players, Joe Dumars, Isaiah Thomas, Mookie Blaylock, John. I mean, he's done it to all the great perimeter guards, Gary Payne. He did it to all these guys, when he was playing against Alvin Robertson, Hersey Hawkins. He did it to Dominique Wilkins. He did it to everybody. That was one of his patented moves. You know what I'm talking about if you've seen it. Another one that he did was similar to that one, but what he would do is, if someone beat him on the drive, let's say, or even sometimes he would allow people to get the step on him, and what he would do is, when they went around, he would swing down like this and slap down on the ball, right? And almost cup it at the same time, where he would jump, let them go, and he would swipe it like that and take it and get and be off to the races. I've seen him do it several times. So those are three distinct movements that Jordan would do consistently on the defensive end, and he would consistently get steals. Jordan was a better in the passing lanes than Scottie Pippen, which is why Jordan led the league in steals 3 different times. Pippen led the league in steals 1 time. And the funny thing about that one time that Pippen led the league in steals was the year, I believe it was the second year that Jordan was playing baseball, that he came back towards the end of the season. I think it was 94, 95. Pippen led the league in steals. So if Jordan would have played that entire season, probably both of them wouldn't have led the league in steals, but they probably both would have been, towards the top. But that just shows you, like I said, the tenaciousness and the IQ of Jordan on the defensive end. Like I told you, he was a high risk, high reward player sometimes on the defensive end, especially early in his career. He would take a lot of gambles early in his career. As he got older, he gambled less and less because he didn't have that kind of recovery athletically as he did in his younger years. So he became a more sound defender in his later years. He would still gamble, but not as often as he would in his first, 4, 5, 6 years in the league. Whereas Pippen, he was never a gambler per se on defense. He would make more calculated risk. He wouldn't gamble as often. I don't think Pippen was as confident in himself as Jordan was, obviously. So he wouldn't put himself out there as often as Jordan would on the defensive end. Like I said, that's not making you a bad defender or a worse defender. It's just something that's in you on the defensive end. So when we look at all these things, we're not going to talk about the Defensive Player of the Year award that Michael Jordan won. We're not going to focus on his steals titles. We're not going to talk about the fact that he's like the only guard in NBA history to have over 100 blocks and 200 steals in a season, and he did that back-to-back years. And the only other player to ever do that, granted, this is in the modern era, was Hakeem Olajuwon. So it's really mind-boggling when you see numbers like that, the things that Jordan was doing on the defensive end, and we've never even. And this is with a man that was, so people, the whole team basically relied on him and depended on him to score 30 points a game. So not only was he a tenacious lockdown defender for his entire career, he was just as potent on the offensive end his entire career. So when you talk about a Scottie Pippen and you compare him to a Michael Jordan on the defensive end, Jordan was a better on-ball defender. Jordan was a better help defender. Jordan was a better in the passing lanes. Jordan was a better post defender. Jordan was more aggressive. He was more of a gambler on the defensive end. So with all those things taken into consideration, you would have to say that Michael Jordan was in overall the better defender. And everything is there. The numbers are there. I'm not talking about numbers though, but the numbers, everything is there, backs up what I'm saying to you. But like I'm telling you about the eye test and what I watched and what I seen. And that's the difference between them two. They're both all-time great defenders. Michael Jordan is arguably, I guess not arguably, he is, in my estimation, the greatest shooting guard on the defensive end. And obviously he's the greatest shooting guard of all time. That's not a question, but I'm talking about defensively. He's the greatest defensive player at his position. There were close guys, maybe not really close guys, but there are guys that that were solid. Dwayne Wade was a solid defender. Alvin Robertson, Michael Cooper. What's the other guy's name that played for the Milwaukee Bucks. He was a really Sidney Moncrief. So you had guys like that. These are all-time great defenders at that position, you know. But Michael Jordan, like I said, I put him above them because Michael Jordan was just as great as them defensively. But on the offensive end, there's no contest between Michael Jordan or Sidney Moncrief or an Alvin Robertson or a Michael Cooper, you know, or any of these guys on the defensive end for shooting guards goes. So I have to give Jordan that edge there, man, because he was able to be that tenacious and that good while maintaining his offensive efficiency and offensive tenacity. So in conclusion, guys, this is not taking anything away from Scottie Pippen. I think Scottie Pippen is an all-time great defender. I would say he's one of the top 3 defensive small forwards of all time. You know, but when you hear people say that Scottie Pippen was better than Michael Jordan on the defensive end, like I said, it's laughable because, like I said, when you watch the games, Scottie Pippen was a great defender and he had advantages that Jordan didn't have. Like I told you about the arms and the height, but that's really where the advantages stop. So oftentimes, you know, if Michael Jordan was guarding somebody on the perimeter, a shooting guard, let's say, you know, he would lock his guys down. Michael Jordan was known for shutting people down, whether it was the second half of a game, maybe a guy had a good first half and Jordan shut him down the second half, or, you know, game got tight, you know, and Jordan needed to step up his defense and he would lock dudes down the last, you know, parts of games. Scottie Pippen didn't really have that ability to lock somebody down, but what Scottie Pippen would do is he would wear you down. So Scottie Pippen would pick up dudes full court because Scottie Pippen could expend energy that Michael Jordan couldn't, because Michael Jordan, they needed him on the offensive end, especially, like I said, after, like, you know, Michael Jordan 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years in the league. After those first 5 or 6 seasons, Scottie Pippen became the main defender on the Bulls because they realized in order for them to win at a high level, they needed everything Jordan had on the offensive end. So later on in their careers, or in the middle of their careers, let's say, you know, Pippen would take the assignment of the other team's, you know, better perimeter player, let's say. But that wasn't because Jordan couldn't. It just wasn't smart for the Bulls to play that way. And Pippen didn't have the obligations that Jordan did on the offensive end. So Pippen could essentially rest on offense and use all of his energy on defense, whereas Jordan could rest a little bit on defense, a little bit, because his mind wouldn't allow him to rest on defense. He just wasn't going to be playing against the other team's top offensive perimeter threat. And then he needed all of his energy for the offensive end. So that's the main difference. And I think that's where people get caught up when they see videos or they hear someone say, oh, well, Pippen guarded this guy and Jordan couldn't do it. That's not the case, man. There's plenty of film. Go out and watch it, and you'll see Jordan consistently lock down perimeter players. I'm talking about locking them down to the point where they're not scoring any points and they're missing every shot and they're getting bad turnovers. That's what Jordan did to people because of his aggression on the defensive end. Pippen didn't have that mentality on the defensive end, so he didn't have the ability to necessarily shut players down, but he would make it difficult for players. Because like I said, Pippen would pick you up, 98 feet. That's what he would do because he could expend that kind of energy on the defensive end. So I hope you guys enjoyed my video. I know it's kind of long. Just listen to it. It's good information, man, and watch the videos, and you'll see everything that I'm saying is true. All right? So thanks again, Sports and Fitness Rants. I'm your boy Rob. Please click the like button and subscribe to my channel.